All right, welcome back to episode 57 of Reptile Genetics Weekly, and I'm your host, Justin Kobylka, but I have no idea what I'm talking about, so let's try this again.
All right, this is Dr. Ben Morrill. Welcome to episode 57 of Reptile Genetics Weekly. We do have a guest today. See if you can guess who it is. But first of all, as always, we'll talk about updates on tests that are going. So as we've been doing for several weeks now, we have fast test results going out, and those are available for everything that we have right now except for Russo. Hopefully next week we'll have Russo as well. So yes, fast tests are going out pretty much every work day. And then the next panel run, for those of you doing panels, those results will come out probably midweek next week, or actually probably late next week. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week, something like that. And then sex determination for both ball pythons and colubrids, those are going out a couple times a week. So you usually have 3 to 5 business days from when we receive those. That's all I have for sample updates. Kayla, how are you doing?
Hey, Ben, I'm doing great. And we got a special guest today, Mr. Justin Kobylka of KINOVA. How you doing, Justin?
So excited. First time, and what a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. So, Ben, what do we want to talk about today?
Well, before we get going with the main Axanthic subject, we do want to remind people throughout the month of May, we do have our Pick 4 special going on. Mm-hmm. So really all you're doing, you're paying for 2 tests, and many of our tests now are $50, and then adding the second one is $25. So if there's 4 that you want to test for, and at least one of those 4 is one of the $50 ones, then you can add the other one for $25. And you can do this through Clutch or Morph Market, but you pay for those 2. But when you have the bag, the sheds in, write Pick 4 on it and write the 4 you want us to test for. And you'll be paying for 2, but we'll run all 4 for you. And for those of you that have a whole bunch of those, you know, you're going to need in July and August or whatever, you can buy them now in the month of May, and then use them later on. So that's completely fine. If you want to get 20 or 30 or more, as we've had several people do, people are taking advantage, which that's smart. Do it while you can. We'll hopefully have a Pick 5 before too long, or even pick up to 5 your custom amount. And that pricing will be a little different, but for the month of May, that's what you got. So jump on it while you can.
All right. Awesome. So, yeah, thank you for that reminder. It does end June 1st. So go ahead, jump on that before your clutches get here. We will honor it if you buy it this month. But yeah, so we're talking about Axanthic today, right?
Yeah. So last week we talked some on the live about Axanthic and the fact that we're able to test for TSK, which is Snake Keeper line of Axanthic. And today we just wanted to go kind of into some background. Oh, we got a visitor.
We got visitor. Oh, Potato, come here. Come here, let me love you.
Perfect timing when we're talking about Axanthic.
Exactly. Yeah. Hi, Melanin. We got this little goblin.
That's a black Axanthic right there.
That is a black
that's
Axanthic.
A dark one.
We've got those bright eye colors. You know, she's absolutely beautiful. Will probably slice me to shreds if I keep holding her. So
before we get into talking about some Axanthic history, I did want to update. So we said last week that all of the MJs we have run were identical to the GCRs, and that we had a GCR test that was really good, but it's like 98%. We want to get to 99. So the GCR test is not available yet. I have, hopefully next week, I'll get more data on that run where we're doing all the panels. I'll get some more information about GCR and Monsoon and Monarch and some others. But as far as Axanthic goes, we may be able to tweak that GCR test so that it'll be ready. But yeah, so as of last week, all the MJs we had run matched the GCRs. But actually this week I ran some more. So we do have some that were sent into us as MJ line that do not test identical as GCR. So like we said last week, we're not ready to say for sure. And I'm glad that I said that, because now I don't know for sure if things are mislabeled or people don't know for sure what they have, or it's also possible that they are for sure MJ line, but there's 2 different mutations, like with Ultramel and Yellow Belly and all that. So anyway, but with that, I'll have Justin jump in and talk a little bit about, I know some of us in the United States have had some Axanthics pop up in pieds, and kind of just some of that history as far as MJ and GCR and stuff like that.
Sure. Okay. So this is a quite an interesting story because it seems like somehow Axanthic was mixed into the pieds, right? It was in the very early pieds that came out of Peter Call. So it started out where I think it was actually Jeff with GCR that hatched some Axanthics out of the blue, out of his piebalds. And it wasn't more than a year later that from a clutch of just going for pieds for me, I hatched some Axanthic pieds. And in fact, this is the very first one. It ended up being a yellow belly Axanthic pied. And then one of my customers who also bought pies from me, Rich McCall, a really awesome dude in California, he hatched some Axanthics out of his pieds. And so suddenly we had 3 different locations where Axanthics had popped up out of pieds. And I knew there was just a high chance there was a correlation of them all being the same line. They came all from pies that were purchased originally from Peter Call pretty early on. And had no idea as far as compatibility. We also knew, or I was pretty sure that Marcus Jane or Mark Mandick had produced some Axanthics out of his pieds. And of course, he's been around forever, probably got his pieds directly from Peter Call. And there was just seemed like a high correlation, a high chance there that these were going to be compatible. So it was really cool because I'll give complete credit to Rich, who did all the work, because he tried TSK, he tried a VPI, and then he finally tried an MJ, and he proved that the Axanthics that he and I had were compatible with MJ. And I just had this strong feeling that GCR was also going to end up that way just because of the origin story of his Axanthics as well. So cool to see that seemingly working out that direction now.
Yes. Yeah, it'll take a little time and some more running. And any of you that have MJ or GCR animals, if you can send sheds in, I'll be running them. If you want to send some, or visual Axanthics of either of those lines or hets, and then throw in a few possets, I'll run them for the tests we have right now and get back to you. But yeah, we'll get it figured out for sure. What's going on? I kind of wonder if either there's a shed mix up here or there or whatever, or if there really is just 2 mutations that are compatible in both the GCR and MJ. So they could be mutations in the exact same gene, just in a little different spot, just like we see with yellow belly and ultramel, like we talked about earlier. So, but yeah, it'll just take running some more tests to figure that out. So
yeah, it's super cool though to also just reduce the number of lines. I mean, naming is always going to be a challenge because people who have GCR are going to call it GCR. Who have MJ, I'm sure they'll keep calling it MJ. But just knowing that there's one less extra line out there that seems to be headed that way, that's really cool. It's good for the new keepers, that's for sure.
Yes, and I've definitely seen people post since we had the live, during the live and since the live, saying, oh, if there's less Axanthic lines, I'm more interested in getting into Axanthics, because like you said, especially if you're new to it, not having to learn about all these different things, or the last thing you want to do is raise a female for 3 years and get a clutch and find out the male you bred her to isn't the same line or the compatible lines.
It's also hard for sellers, because people only want to buy the niche line that they have, right? So if you have MJ, that really narrows the amount of sellers you could potentially consider your Axanthics from. It's true for any line. So the fewer number of lines is, the wider the customer base is for any person who works within a line. So, this animal right here, this is the one the most recently one we hatched, and you guys tested it. You ran a full gamut on it. It ended up being a Super OD Enchi yellow belly hurricane Axanthic pied. Wow. So MJ line. So it's just extremely packed when you have the saddles completely disappear, where you only have the 2 lines and the whole rest of the saddle is so pale that it looks white with the rest of the snake.
That is cool.
Super neat.
Oh yeah, that is an awesome animal. Well, how about the black Axanthic story? I know that started with VPI, right?
Yeah, VPI. Tracy posted a picture way back on kingsnake.com forums. Is back in 2008, and she posted this clutch that she had hatched. And like these are the really black Axanthics, she called them, from Africa. We brought in a couple of them, or I think maybe we started with one original animal, but they're way darker. And she said they're not compatible with VPI, and they're really really special. And they looked so special. And so I ended up buying a female from her in 2008, and that was the picture we just showed. And then in 2009, I bought a male from her. And they're both, by the time I got them, they were a few months old. This one right here was a little younger, the male in 2009. And he didn't start out, they all started out kind of a standard Axanthic look. And then they just turned very, very black, hence the name Black Axanthic. But that original female was the blackest of them all, just so beautiful. And the male turned quite black as well. But as I started breeding them, we started producing more and more into the future. It seems like the adults stopped turning really, really dark like that. They of course, they all started out looking like regular Xanthics. This is a 2012, the first year I actually made my own babies from the pair that I got from them. And they just didn't turn as black as the parents, although they were black, blacker than typical. And then seemed like every year since then, I've had declining results as far as them turning extremely black. And I'd love to get your feedback on that. But that's the story of the Black Axanthic, and we proved that it wasn't compatible with TSK. I mean, excuse me, we proved it wasn't compatible with VPI early on. And I was always like, I just don't want to do a lot of experimentation. I don't have that many other lines, and I'd love to know what it is, but if it's compatible with something else, somebody will someday tell me. That's where I got left it.
Yeah. The only thing I would come to my mind is so when you talk about captive breeding, like when I taught at a university, I taught a captive reproduction class, breeding, I guess kind of like breeding strategies for captive breeding. And this is more for food animals. But the principles obviously apply to any captive breeding. You really can only focus on so many things. So like if you're focused on making the blackest ball python you can, and that's all you care about, you're not mixing anything else in, you don't care about improving reproduction or the rate at which they get to sexual reproduction or anything else, all you do is care about making really, really black Axanthics, you can probably keep that around. But as soon as you try to mix other things or whatever, if that one mutation that makes it Axanthic is different from 2 or 3 other mutations that maybe help it be really black, then over time, as you add other genes and things, you're diluting out that blackness. And so that's also what can happen if you really focus for breeding for a look, whether it's in cattle or horses or whatever, dogs. If you breed for a specific look, sometimes the resulting animals aren't as reproductively sound. The reproduction rates go down. You have dystocia problems because the breeder's not focused on making healthy reproductive animals. They're focused on a look. And so, I mean, as far as like from a breeding strategies, that would be what I would think is if you turned around and went back to really focusing on making them black, you could get that back. But I don't know. You mentioned
the challenge is that the challenge is when you're deciding which ones to keep, you're deciding usually when they're young, and you don't know which ones are going to turn very, very black until you'd have to keep entire clutches for long periods of time. So it makes it harder to select for that. Plus, of course, in this ball python world, we're selecting for adding other traits, which again is you're saying, well, I'm going to keep the one that has that 2 extra traits that you're trying to add, regardless of how it may look in 3 years, which you can't even know. So I guess it's hard to kind of breed for that specifically.
Yeah. And that's a very good point. If it's a trait you don't know until they're adult, that's really hard to select for. But I would say any of you out there that have really black Axanthics, I know some people have sent in samples for testing for various or helping develop tests for various lines, and they'll say like dark phase in parentheses. Keep doing that, because eventually if I have 20 or 30, whether they're for TSK or VPI or GCR or whatever it is, if I know this is an especially dark one, eventually I can take those 20 or 30 that are all really dark, and we can look for mutations that seem to correlate with the really dark ones. Then maybe we can select for that with genetic testing. So that's something we can aim for. It sounds to me like it's something that's popping up in different Axanthic lines sometimes. And like we just said, if you have to wait till it's an adult to be able to know which one is going to be like that, that's going to be really hard to keep that in your breeding, pool.
Right. Very interesting.
I'm just popping in to add that I really relate to this on a black rat level, because I'm all over in my little colubrid corner here. My black rats have huge ontogenic changes from when they're babies. They come out black and gray and white, and you don't know until maybe a year and a half or so where they actually start to darken up, and you don't know if you're going for like a black rat snake. So I nothing to add except that I hugely relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but anyway, going back downstairs.
So yeah, as those of you see from the thumbnail today, we're pretty focused on talking about Axanthics, and one we especially wanted to bring up is black Axanthics, and we do have some news about black Axanthics. So far, we have animals from 5 different keepers. We are over a dozen now, and that's what I usually shoot for, is at least 4 different keepers and at least a dozen animals, to be able to tell whether something matches a test we already have. And so the TSK test that we just made available and is available as a fast test, the black Axanthics and het black Axanthics we've tested so far all are identical to that TSK test. So they test the same as a TSK. So that was surprising. I did not expect that at all. I had quite a few animals, and I ran VPI, TSK, and the GCR, the best version of the test we have. And I did not expect that at all, but they just popped up, boom, matched perfectly to TSK.
Yeah, what a revelation. I don't think it would have been surprising if they hadn't been so dark initially. And that just made them seem different, right? And that made everybody's expectation they would be different. And the funny thing is I always like, I have VPI, and of course now I popped up with MJ, but I was always like, I don't have SK. It's just not my thing. I don't have SK. Well, apparently I always have. and I have always had SK now, and that's okay. They're it's another, I think, overall positive for our industry that we have a reduction of the number of lines of Axanthic, which again really opens up the customer base, opens up the breeder base for these, and makes everybody who works with these lines, makes it less niche. Because I'll be honest, I've been told my Patreon, different people for a while now, it's like, I love black Axanthic because I'm learning to love Axanthic, but it also, because it was black Axanthic and because it was so niche, it was just a very narrow band of customers who could work with it. Everybody else had their own special line. I'm sorry, we already have, SK, we already have MJ, we already have this, we can't buy black Axanthic, makes no sense. Now there's a giant customer base for all the amazing black Axanthic combos, for all the people who are already out there, thanks in great part to John Degg, right? And all the SK work he's done.
Oh yeah.
So he's built that project. He's built the SK Axanthics, just for all the work he's done with them and all the ones he's put into circulation. So yeah, really cool in the end, I think, although a big shocker.
Yeah, I think the other important thing we can learn from this is, if you have a really dark black Axanthic, that to me, it sounds like that's a different mutation, a different trait, or maybe even a couple. And so those sheds are valuable. If you can send those in, we can try to figure out, what that other mutation or mutations are that help us get that really dark animal, because like you brought up, they seem to get dark as they age. And so unless you're keeping whole clutches to watch and see which ones turn dark, you're going to lose some of those really dark animals, because you're going to sell them before you know they're going to go really dark.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole, though. And theoretically, at that point, it maybe could be separated from the Axanthic, right? And put into other things as well. you'd want to be dark.
It could be, yeah.
Interesting.
Stuff we learned, and that one definitely was completely, I didn't expect that at all. It would be interesting to talk to VPI about that too. They'd probably be pretty surprised. I would imagine they had the VPI line first, right?
Correct. Yeah, it was well out before the Black Axanthic came out. Correct.
So no doubt they would have tried to see if they're compatible, but they probably kind of the same boat as you. They already had VPI, and they got the Black Axanthic, and probably just never took the time to try to breed it to an SK.
No, it's not really typically worth it, because it'd be wasting a clutch if you find out it's not, right? And you end up with a bunch of double hats, and you'd be like, I'm never going to know which line these are prior to shed testing. Now shed testing makes all those little experiments a lot more doable without finding yourself in a bad spot where you just completely wasted the time.
Yes. Which I know you and I have talked about things on my side and your side over the next month or two. Will be pretty fun to announce some other surprises that are popping up, but we'll save that for another time. It's kind of fun and the testing kind of gives you some more information you can give when something pops out and it's a little surprising, or you do a breeding and the odds aren't quite what you expect, but then you can do some testing and figure out, oh, that's why.
Right. And how cool is it that testing is now giving us the answers that only breeding used to give us, right? I think about all the compatibility things. People would be shocked when for example, we found out that my pied line or my Axanthic pied line all came from the MJ stuff, or it's compatible with MJ. That was done by breeding. But now we can find that same thing out without as much time and experimentation, for one. Things like finding out that a few years ago that chocolate and spot nose were allelic. Now we can find out theoretically that genes are allelic without potentially years of missing it because you think you have poor odds or whatever. So how cool. We're getting genuinely actionable information from shed testing, which is really awesome.
Yes, that's what I was hoping for, and that definitely couldn't have guessed some of the things that have popped up. It's been a fun journey, and looking forward to many more years of it. And thank you once again. I've said it on multiple podcasts, but when I was first starting and really needed a whole bunch of sheds, I called Justin out of the blue, and he trusted the crazy scientist dude to show up in his beat up old car and spend all day pulling sheds out of cages. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for taking a chance and believing, because I've been running hard ever since.
Oh, it's been amazing. I had no idea this would turn into, but we were throwing them away. So it wasn't a great loss from us for us. But before we go, let me ask you one question that I get asked all the time.
Yeah.
So is there any reason visually to create an Axanthic that is maybe a double recessive? So a VPI and SK lines in a double homozygous animal. You may not know the answer, but is there any likelihood it would look different?
So this is the disclaimer up front. I'm taking this information from what's been done in like mice and stuff like that. So obviously in snakes, it could be that you do that and something really weird happens. It could be even, I would imagine if it was noticeably different, it would be that it's even darker. I don't know how it could be anything other than that. But, my guess would be that it would end up looking like whichever of the two is the most drastic. So like if you're going to breed, and I don't know if I've certainly heard people talk different ways, which ones end up more dark or whatever. But, I would say it's not, my guess is that it would not be noticeably different from one of the two lines. It would end up looking very similar. Or it could be that, they're close enough anyway. You wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between the double. But the other thing that it would open you up for is if you had a male that was double recessive for VPI and TSK, obviously the females you could pick up to breed him to, all kinds. I guess this other way too. If you had, 3 or 4 females that were all, double recessive for those 2 different ones, you could get a lot of different kinds of males and make Axanthics with them. So,
yeah, interesting. It's interesting theoretical, conversation about how those would look. And I've always had this theory, and I don't know if you would agree. I think all the Xanthic lines are kind of similar as far as looks go. Some people say, oh, one line looks better than another. But in my opinion, I think that the variability is more variable between different animals within a line than they are between lines. Like you see great examples, VPIs, bad example VPIs, same thing with SK or MJ, whatever. You see the best examples and the worst examples. It seems like maybe the other genetics of the animal as far as darkness and colors and everything has just as big of an effect as the Xanthic line you use itself.
Yeah, that from I haven't followed Axanthics. I don't own any Axanthics, so I haven't followed it really close. But over the years, like I'll hear, hey, this is by far the best, or this is by far the best. It doesn't seem like it's consistently been, hey, this one line is always the best. So
we can't agree on it. Yeah.
I would say that's what I've heard as well. And I would say that the other things you breed for, just like with Hurricane versus Trick, there's other things. If the females you're choosing to breed that animal to are really busy, then maybe that helps you get that even more busy look or that more hooked look, So there's certainly other things.
But it's not the gene itself causing that at that point. What it's doing partial, but the female you put it to is also partial to that effect. So you're not getting the whole picture essentially.
Yeah. And
excellent.
Those other genes that help influence, those are the ones that are going to be hard to find, because it's not this major difference. Like what is a Hurricane versus not, or a Trick versus not? That's pretty obvious. But what makes the difference between a Trick and a Hurricane? Those are those, other genes that have smaller effect that are probably coming from the other animals, the non-Hurricane or non-Trick animals you're breeding to. And same thing with the Axanthics. The really dark, nice ones are getting some of those traits from the non-Axanthics that you're breeding them to.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for answering that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for coming on. We appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation. And Kayla, do you have any other questions before we go?
I do. Actually, we haven't done one of these in a while, but since we have Justin here, and I figure we can ask. We normally do our Why We Do This segment, at least probably every few weeks now. And I wanted to know, Justin, what makes this hobby, this industry worthwhile to you? What keeps you coming back to it?
Wow, for me, it's the best part of it is the challenge and the excitement of discovery for me. I mean, the fact that it's hard is a big part of it. The fact that you can put a lot of effort into something and see it come to fruition, and the fact that it's never guaranteed, or it might be way better or way worse than you expect when you think about combos and everything. I love that combination of artistry and chance and discovery all wrapped into one species.
Yeah. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody who came on today, and especially for Justin for making the time to stop in and be on the show. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you enjoyed our little fake out at the beginning with Justin's face popping up after the intro. We think we're funny. And yeah, you guys got anything else before we call it a wrap?
Not for me.
Don't think so. All right. Well, let's call that a day. And outro in 3, 2, 1.